It's about time I re-recorded the Better Volume video for the website. Just made some very minor changes to the Better Volume code over the last couple of days. Plus, I think it's about time I refreshed the feature article on Better Volume. So why not a new, fresh video as well? Better Volume was actually the first indicator that I released the code publicly. It's a very simple indicator. When you look at the code, there are some kind of twists and turns, but at its heart, it's a very simple indicator, and it tries to get to the bottom of what is going on with volume on a particular day or during a particular bar. Just brought up a chart here. This is a daily chart of the E-mini continuous contract day and night session over the last several months, and here's the kind of traditional volume histogram that you see plotted below every kind of price chart. And it's not very easy using your kind of traditional volume histogram to get information out of this chart. So what Better Volume does is it goes through and it kind of compares price factors with volume factors to identify kind of four key bars. So let me just switch off this volume histogram and switch on the Better Volume in its place. And Better Volume comes as both a histogram version and a paint bar version, which paints the price bars with the information from Better Volume itself. So here we go. Here's Better Volume on this chart of the E-mini, and we've got the price bars painted the same colors or similar colors to the volume histogram. There are four conditions that Better Volume is trying to identify: climactic or exhaustion volume, either volume buying or volume selling; the opposite of that, which is kind of low volume conditions where there's not a great deal of demand or supply; and then lastly, high churn bars, which exist when we have relatively high volume and relatively small ranges on the bars. Now, volume exhaustion or climactic volume happens at the beginning of moves and at the end of moves. So we can see here that we've got the beginning of this downtrend started by a series 1, 2, 3 volume climactic or exhaustion selling bars kind of getting this move going. We have a little bit of a rest, bit of a retrace, and a continuation of that with another kind of climactic or exhaustion selling volume bar, and then this whole move ends when we have a series of climactic or exhaustion volume selling bars kind of down here, and they're typically using Better Volume painted as white bars and on the histogram and on the price bars themselves. So you can use exhaustion or climactic volume to start moves and to end moves. On the reverse of that, you've got climactic or exhaustion buying volume, which kind of sets moves off. So for example, here we have climactic buying. The bars are colored red in the case of exhaustion or climactic buying, setting this move going, and then at the top of this move you can again see that we've got kind of climactic buying at the top of this range. Setting this move off, this uptrend move, you can say the same thing. So we've got climactic buying kind of going on, continuation kind of here. We haven't topped out on this up range move, but you can see it's driving the volume each of these times. We also get kind of a little bit of profit taking at the end of these moves, and typically when you see profit taking you have relatively high volume as kind of sellers or buyers are sucked into the market. Typically amateurs are sucked into the market, and the professionals are selling into that amateur buying, or they're buying into that amateur selling. They're doing the opposite, and when they're doing the opposite of what the volume kind of coming into the range is, the range becomes compressed. So if you can imagine the market's moving higher and higher, and we have a relatively high volume day with a relatively low range, that means that the professionals have been selling into that move. So for example, here we have a blue high churn bar where we've reached a high here. The professionals have been selling into that move and they're profit taking at that high. We can also see a similar thing happening over the last day or so. We've got relatively high volume and relatively small range, and that means there's a little bit of profit taking kind of going on there. We also tend to get it at points where we're kind of changing range. So for example, here we're in the middle of this downtrend, we have a little bit of a move back up, and there's quite a lot of activity here at this kind of midpoint, which shows the professionals are are starting to get interested, they are capturing the volume at that point, reducing the range of that bar, and then taking their positions ready for the next kind of trend move to continue down in this case. So that's high volume churn bars. And then the yellow bars on the chart are low volume, relatively low volume bars, and these show where there's a lack of demand or lack of supply, and you tend to see these at tops or bottoms in the market. So you can see this top at the market, it was a relatively low volume range day, and that just showed that there was a lack of activity, a lack of willingness to buy through this peak. You can see a similar move kind of here on this bar here, and this last week on the E-mini we've had a whole range of low volume bars kind of come on, just showing that there's a lack of demand at this kind of previous top level here. So those are the four kind of colorings for better volume. There is a fifth, I'll show you that in kind of later on in the settings for the indicator, but those are the major four kind of colorings of the bar. So they're exhaustion buying, exhaustion selling, high volume churn, and then low volume bars. The coloring, the only kind of little trick to this, the coloring I use on the paint bars here on the chart themselves, on the price bars themselves, I paint these as blue on the price bars, and they happen to be green on the better volume indicator, the histogram kind of below the bars. I don't know why I did that kind of years ago, but it's just kind of convention I've kind of gone with, so I've just kind of sat on that and not changed that. So rather than kind of confuse everybody with me changing the colorings for better volume, I've just kind of kept it as is. But all of those things are configurable. So the code is open. You're welcome to use that to customize for yourself, and you can also kind of set up various things within the code. Let me just show you the settings within better volume. The settings for better volume and the paint bar themselves are very similar, so let's just go and look at those very quickly. On the inputs you can see we've got these four kind of conditions: low volume, climax up, climax down, and high churn. I've switched all of those on to true because that's what I like to see on my charts. There is a fifth condition. You can actually get climax bars that are high volume churn bars as well. Now I'll often get kind of emails saying, well, how can that possibly be true? A climactic bar is, you know, large volume, large range, and a churn bar is large volume, low range. Those can't kind of coexist at the same time. Well, if you do the math, they can actually kind of coexist. So, you know, just go, if you don't believe me, go and kind of check for yourself, and you'll be able to see that kind of exists. I find those a little bit kind of confusing sometimes to have on the chart, so, you know, in the last few years I've kind of just turned those off, but they are available there to you to be able to look at those. And then you can set the colorings for each of these particular bar types. So the low volume bars are set as yellow, the climactic up or exhaustion up volume bars are red, exhaustion or climactic down bars are white, and then these high churn bars are green. These churn and climax bars are set to magenta, but again I've just turned them off on my indicator for the time being, just because I don't find them all that useful. And then you can set the default kind of background color for better volume, which happens, I like the cyan color in TradeStation. Looks nice as a kind of background color. So that's what I do. Then there are two little kind of triggers here, on and off. You can get within TradeStation the number of upticks and downticks available in a particular bar. You can get that on Intraday Charts, and you can also do it on a daily chart by setting the daily bars to 1440 minutes. There are 1440 minutes in a 24-hour period, and so you can have a proxy for a daily bar using an intrabar setting in TradeStation. Now, when that information is available, the indicator will use it to calculate it. It'll just get inside the buying and selling of that bar in a little bit more detail, and so understand it in more detail rather than kind of calculating proxies for the amount of buying and selling going on. So there is a setting to use that, which I set to true. Sometimes the volumes, the data is a little bit messed up, and so what you might do on an intrabar chart where that volume does not look right and it's kind of not giving you the right signals, you can just set that to false, and so it'll default to using an alternate kind of proxy calculation using the open, high, low, close data. And then you can also, I have this set as a default, look at two bar combinations. So when we have exhaustion or climactic buying, churn, and so on, if they occur as two bar combinations instead of just a single bar kind of combination, that's kind of useful to calculate. That's particularly helpful in intraday charts where, you a 10-minute period might have some information in it when you look at it as a 2-bar kind of combination instead of 2 5-minute bars. On the daily basis it's kind of less interesting, but I'd still set it to true on my daily charts. But again, if you're not into that, if that's not kind of looking at 2-bar combinations, you can turn it on and turn it off and see if it gives you kind of extra information or not. And then the last thing here, there's an average shown on the histogram. If you like, you can set that to true, and that will just calculate a long-term 200-day kind of moving average of the volume there, so you can see whether today's volume was kind of above or below the average for that long kind of period. And then there's the coloring for that average line on the bar. So there we go. Those are the settings. They're kind of similar between the paint bar and the histogram themselves, and there are just a couple of wrinkles in terms of what to do. The default settings kind of work just fine. You don't have to mess around. You just kind of pull this in from TradeStation or into whatever program you're using. The code's been kind of translated for. Just kind of use the default settings and kind of go with that. So I'm just going to show you, because it's an indicator that's pretty universal, you can use it on all time frames and all markets. I'll just show you a couple of different markets and just how the signals kind of help you understand what's going on. So that was just a daily chart of the E-mini using the day and the night session here. You can pull it up on an index. So for example, here's the NASDAQ index here, and you can see not dissimilar information to what we saw on the E-mini, but you can see this exhaustion climactic selling happening here, where the market basically runs out of sellers. Then we have a final kind of climactic selling bar. We make a little bit of progress down in terms of making new lows, but it's not nearly as much selling volume here. And then this is the beginning of the uptrend. We got a couple of climactic exhaustion buying bars here, setting this move going. And then we've got up here, we've got a couple of low volume days where we kind of run out of volume, and then we kind of fall back into this kind of support area. You'll also get kind of spikes down, so we get kind of some spikes selling down here or spikes selling down here, but because we're in an uptrend, the people that have been scared out selling here, the professionals kind of come in here and pick the market up. We've got some little bit of profit taking there going on with this high volume churn bar, blue bar there at the highs of that move, and we kind of sell off and so on. So you can see within different history of what is going on, you can start to interpret what is actually happening at the moment. Let's look at crude here just on a weekly chart, so a longer time frame, and this is an example of where I was saying you have exhaustion kind of climactic activity at the beginning and the end of the move. So here we go, this is selling this move down from $120 in crude here. This is the exhaustion selling getting this move going, and then the move kind of bottomed out with exhaustion selling at this point here, and the market starts to reverse and go the other way. We also have profit taking going on up here. You can see these high volume churn bars, blue bars up at these highs at 110. Professionals kind of taking profits. The ranges are relatively compressed because they're selling into that, any up moves or any buying going on at that point, and we kind of fall off here. And then we have the exhaustion selling that ends this move, and then exhaustion buying kind of getting this move going. So that's even on a weekly chart, it's working quite nicely. Works on stocks as well. So this is Apple on a daily chart. You can see here, the market kind of sold off. We have high volume churn bars. You can see how high the volume was on that day, relatively small ranges over a couple of days, and that's the professionals picking up this kind of selling activity, not letting the market move under 570 for Apple, and then we kind of go off in an uptrend here. We've also got the beginning of a downtrend, and then the end of a downtrend. We've also got the beginning of an uptrend, and so on. And then you get little periods here where we've got little low volume kind of selling going on into this low here, and low volume kind of bars selling into a little area of kind of support. Just shows there's a lack of supply at that point, and the market kind of moves on. Here's the euro on a weekly chart. You can see this same kind of thing. This is using the futures contract for euro, which has volume data. If you're just plotting the cash contract for the euro, there's no volume data there. You'd have to use tick count as a proxy for that. But in the case of the euro futures contract, there is data here. So you can see here at the bottom of this move, high volume churn, relatively high volume, relatively small range. So that's the professionals buying this little dip here. We kind of set off into this up move, kind of take profits with a a high volume churn bar here at the end and so on. We get exhaustion selling and then followed by exhaustion buying, a reversal kind of pattern here. We set off into this uptrend. At this point here you can see we've got some high volume churn going on here. That's not necessarily profit taking, that's as the people are trying to sell into that market, the professionals are maybe picking it up and making sure that the market does not sell off. They're interested in any selling that happens during those couple of days, couple of weeks, and so that allows them to hold the lows, if you like, of that bar. The range gets compressed and the volume is relatively high, and then it allows, once we kind of break out of that little range, it just shows that they've been buying that little kind of consolidation pattern. They're in anticipation of the market kind of moving on. I've got kind of the opposite kind of going on here, and maybe here as well. So as we kind of test back up here, the professionals are saying no, I'm selling into any buying that's happening there, and so it's compressing the range here with relatively high volume, and then that allows them to kind of take positions at that particular point. The market kind of sells off. I must admit, I do like the high volume churn bars whenever I see those on daily or weekly charts or whatever. They're kind of useful in terms of seeing where you might have interesting turning points kind of happening. And then you can go down to intraday charts, tick charts and minute charts. This is just a 4500 tick bar chart of the E-mini. This is day and night session, so this is the close of the day, this is the open of the next day, and you can see the same types of patterns going on. Although there's kind of differences during the day in terms of the volume kind of going on, you can see the beginning of this up move set off by a whole series of exhaustion buying patterns here. We also have some high volume churn here, which shows the professionals are not letting the market sell off at that point because we burst out of that congestion range. It might be a place where people are taking profits it's at a previous high, you can see here, but because they're kind of keeping the range kind of compressed, any selling that's happening at that point is not allowed to kind of go past the lows of those bars, and so they're absorbing all of that selling happening at that point, which allows then the market to kind of keep on going, and it kind of keeps going until we get these exhaustion selling bars at the top. We kind of test into it again here and sell off a little bit here. So same types of patterns that you see kind of recurring on the intraday charts. And lastly, 5-minute chart. This was actually Friday's activity, which was very kind of compressed. We had extremely small ranges during this day, but you can see how you got selling starts the day off here with a strong selling bar here, ends this down move here into a low volume bar, so lack of supply at that point, and then buying, climactic buying, setting this move off. Ends this move temporarily here. We get kind of a low volume bar showing a lack of demand at these highs, and then we kind of sell off, and again we get a whole series of little 1, 2, 3, 4 little low volume bars at this kind of ledge, if you like, and that just shows a lack of supply at that point. The selling is actually quite weak there, and we kind of rally on to the end of the day. It's a Friday, so there's a lot of profit taking here at the end of the day, so quite high volumes, quite high churn bars, just because that's kind of the last few minutes of the day, and professionals kind of just taking profits, getting out of positions for the end of the week. So there we go, a little kind of refresh on better volume. As I said, it's been out there and kind of the open code's been available. It's gone through several revisions over time. You can see the revision log at the end of the code, and you can see the various changes that have been made at various points. It's been a kind of a staple standard of mine, quite useful at points in time just to see what's going on in terms of the volume, and it just gives you that kind of inside look as to what is going on, looking at the buying and selling and the range of the bar to understand what's actually kind of driving the market at that particular point. So it's free code, hope you enjoy it, and good luck with your trading.